Resident Evil: The Village looms on the horizon and promises to continue the lore established in Resident Evil 7. But what about those who want to jump into the new game but want to know the story of the previous title but maybe don't have the time to play it? Well, take a seat, grab a cup of tea, as I walk you through a story of lies, secrets, tragedy and heroics. Welcome to Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, the recap. First things first, I can confirm that this story does take place in the established Resident Evil universe, with there being references to the Raccoon City incident, there being references to Umbrella, and there being past characters involved. But Biohazard is mainly a separate story, focusing on a new threat, a new biohazard danger, and new characters. The story begins with a woman called Mia recording a loving message for her husband Ethan, who she misses, and she is on a boat and apparently on a babysitting job. Quickly we can see this isn't the full story of what she's saying, as a moment later she records a more frantic message, warning her husband to stay away. She and the girl she is minding is called Evelyn, and they are aboard a ship. Something goes terribly wrong, and it ends up beached in Louisiana. A local family, the Bakers, find them both unconscious at the shipwreck, and take them both in. Then, neither Mia or the Bakers are seen for 3 years. The game proper begins with Ethan driving down to Louisiana, after receiving a mysterious email from his wife Mia, who has been missing for 3 years at this point. Ethan arrives at the Baker farm in Dulvey, Louisiana, the address given by Mia via email, and begins to search this farm for any sign of her. He quickly finds her driver's license, confirming that this is indeed the place. After scouting out the property for some time, Ethan is able to enter the guest house, and he follows in the steps of a paranormal film crew by watching their tape of their journey, and we learn some backstory to the estate and the people who lived here. It belonged to the well-to-do and well-respected family known as the Bakers, until they disappeared 3 years ago, and over the ensuing period there have been local strange disappearances across the area. The only bad member of the family was Lucas, the son, of which there were plenty of rumours circulating that he was a bad seed. Following in the footsteps of the team via the video, Ethan finds a secret passage and finds his way to Mia, who appears to have been held captive and has no memory of sending Ethan a message or email, as in reality she wanted him to stay away as per the initial recording we saw in the game. Whilst trying to find a way out, Mia, seeming almost possessed, attacks him with unnatural strength and in a crazed frenzy, before Ethan is forced to defend himself, and he puts her down with an axe, and she is seemingly dead. He then receives a phone call from a Zoe, who turns out to be later Zoe Baker, who tells him to escape out the attic. Upon turning around from the phone call, we notice that Mia is disappeared. On the way out, he is once again attacked by a resurrected Mia, who ends up cutting his hand off with a chainsaw. In the attic, Ethan finds a gun and once again puts down his possessed wife, before being knocked out by Jack Baker, the patriarch of this family. Upon waking, Ethan finds he has had his hand stapled back on by the daughter Zoe, but he is now strapped in a chair, tied to a chair, face to face with the Baker family, who seem completely insane. There is Marguerite, Jack, Lucas the son, and Granny. Before long, he is left alone, and he escapes, and he almost manages to get help from a patrolling police officer who's checking out the disappearances in the area. Unfortunately, Jack catches up to them both and kills the officer. This results in Ethan and Jack having a fight in the garage, where Ethan eventually gets the better of Jack, getting in a car, running him over, blowing him up, and then blowing his head off. We are beginning to see that there is some kind of infection or something affecting the people in this household, like Mia and like Jack, as they both seem impossible to kill and they both have unnatural strength and abilities. After this fight, the phone rings again and Ethan is told by Zoe that he needs to escape. This is when Ethan realises that Zoe is Jack's still sane daughter, and he apologises for having killed Jack, but Zoe says he is no longer my father. Listening to Zoe, she tells him he needs to escape from the house. However, the front door is locked by a mechanism, and Ethan must find 3 dog head reliefs, which act as keys, and along the way he once again encounters Jack, who is seemingly resurrected. After evading Jack and going around the house, he makes his way to the processing area in the basement for the final key, and this is where things get really gnarly and we get to see the true extent of this issue. Black fungal residues infecting the whole area, and vicious creatures made of fungus attack Ethan as he explores the area. They seem to have the same strength and regenerative properties as Jack and the Bakers. These are the Moulded, and serve as the basic enemies for the game. We'll explain these guys later, but suffice it to say these guys are born from the same fungal infection that courses through the Baker family, and allows the rest of them to regenerate. Upon finding the final key, Ethan is once again attacked by Jack, and they enter into an intense chainsaw duel, with Jack seemingly defeated for good this time, being completely bisected at the waist. Ethan then unlocks the door and makes his way outside. He finds Zoe's caravan, who once again phones Ethan and directs him towards the old house on the estate so that he can develop a vaccine for herself and Mia so all three of them can escape, because they cannot leave the farm until they've been cured, as Zoe explains. Meanwhile, Mia has left a tape for Ethan. She's back to her normal self, apologising and asking for his help, before she's once again captured and imprisoned by Marguerite. Entering the old house, he finds it to be the domain of Marguerite Baker, who has an affinity for insects, and he finds that Mia has been taken captive by Marguerite and Lucas in the basement. Ethan burns his way through the house to try and get to the upstairs of the building to try and find the ingredients for a cure, when Marguerite tries to kill him by throwing him into a hole and trying to feed him to bugs. However, Ethan reverses their position and proceeds to the upstairs. In here he finds a medical official looking sealed case, much like those used by the bioweapon companies of the past games, which details the ingredients for the serum. These ingredients are a D-type arm and D-type head. On their next phone call, Zoe tells Ethan that she does have the head, but he must check upstairs on the second floor of the old house to see if her mother has an arm. This is in fact confirmed by a note where Marguerite talks about a shrine where the girl has given her an arm and she keeps this arm within the shrine. Upon going upstairs, he realises that he needs Marguerite's bug lantern to proceed, and so he finds her and chases her through a tunnel to another wing of this house. Here he faces her mutated, insect-like form before burning her to glass, taking the lantern from her remains. After using it to unlock the upstairs of the old house, he finds a child's bedroom and a hidden shrine which contains the arm that he's looking for. He is warned away by a child before being attacked by more Moulded. The child has been referenced at many points up until now throughout the game, seeded through little bits of lore. There is a sign outside the Baker farm saying, "Accept her gift." Marguerite talks about accepting her gift when chasing Mia. Mia talks about her when she attacks you, and there's a photo of Mia and the girl together that you can find. In the bedroom we find drawings as done by a little girl, obsessing about having a family. This is Evelyn, and she is the true antagonist of the story, and the central focus for this fungal infection that controls Mia and the Bakers. It was she that Mia arrived here with and was taken in by the Bakers, but we'll get onto her in more detail in a moment. After retrieving the arm, Ethan gets a phone call from Lucas Baker, who has taken Zoe and Mia hostage. Lucas is intelligent and a psycho, something that has little to do with Evelyn's infection. He has the head that Ethan needs and forces Ethan into a series of activities so Ethan can claim the head. Ethan is forced to play several of his jigsaw-like games before he makes it through to Zoe and Mia and frees them both. Lucas flees the scene meanwhile. Jack once again appears in a huge, monstrous form, having regenerated once more, and attacks the trio just as the serum has been developed by Zoe, and after a long battle, Ethan is forced to use one of the serums on Jack to put down his mutated form for good. For you see, as is explained by Zoe, and in the lab later on, the serum only works and helps you if you are not too far gone. If you are too far gone, it calcifies all the fungal microbes that are in you and kills you, as happens to Jack here. The players then face the choice to give either Zoe or Mia the injection, as they cannot leave the swamp if Evelyn's control over them remains. The canon choice, as per the DLC reveals, is that he gives it to his wife, which makes sense given he's come all the way here for Mia. Ethan promises he'll send help for Zoe, and Mia and Ethan get on a boat and leave the swamp. On the journey, Ethan demands answers, but Mia cannot remember much. But then they find a ship stranded in the swamp. This is the ship that Mia was once on when she was on her babysitting trip. Before they can discuss it any further, they are tipped and thrown off the boat. Ethan is then taken by a black residue, and Mia must pursue him into the ship to save him. We play as Mia for this portion of the game. Aboard the ship, Mia is confronted by projections of Evelyn, who taunts her and calls her mommy. Impatient for Mia's memory to return, Evelyn reveals the truth behind the whole incident. Mia was in fact an operative with an underground bioweapons group called the Connections, and she and her partner were to escort Evelyn to Central America via boat. This move came because other groups probably Umbrella being one of them, were sniffing around and there was fear that she would be taken. Evelyn is actually a bioweapon, a fusion between an embryo and a fungal growth, as part of a mind control weapons program. Evelyn has the power to infect people and take control of them through this infection. She is the E-series of this project, the peak in this line of development. She can also create moulded creatures from the mould she exudes from her body, and reshapes people into these moulded creatures. The way in which Evelyn manifests her mind control powers is through the desire for a family. That's how Evelyn sees it. The moulded are part of her family. She wanted the Bakers to be her family. She wanted Mia to be her mommy, and she made Mia bring Ethan here via email so he could become the daddy. This is why there's so many references to family throughout the game, because this is how Evelyn controls people and how she sees it in her mind. On this boat journey, Evelyn went aggressive when there was a storm, and started spawning the moulded, and infected Mia and her partner, before the boat was shored by a storm. It was here that the Bakers found Mia and Evelyn, and took them in out of concern, before themselves being infected and becoming part of Evelyn's sick family. The rest is history. While Ethan is cocooned by Evelyn, he has a discussion with an apparition of whatever is left of the original Jack that is in the fungal network. He describes to Ethan how they are actually good people, but they have been forced to become killers and taken over by Evelyn's infection. He begs Ethan to kill Evelyn and free his family, who have been completely destroyed by Evelyn's influence. Ethan is then freed by Mia, who is once again taken captive by Evelyn's infection. Her last instruction to Ethan as she presses a vial of the E001 sample into his hand is, "Kill the little bitch." Ethan then enters the mines below the ship, where he enters the Connections lab, which is where the Connections group had actually established their lab after the Baker incident had happened. It turns out Lucas has actually been working with them, and sending reports on the progression of the mould, even been given a serum by them that freed him from Evelyn's mind control, despite the fact he remains infected. So it seems like, despite the fact this was actually an accident, it looks like the Connections group used this as an experiment to see how the mould would progress, and how Evelyn would behave out with control of her minder. In one of his reports he notes that Evelyn has begun to destabilise, which has resulted in her ageing rapidly. When Ethan is in the lab, he mixes the E-series sample and creates an E-series toxin, and he returns to the guest house through a secret tunnel, after a fairly intense battle with Evelyn's moulded minions. Evelyn tries to keep him away from her, but he manages to reach her and injects her nonetheless, freeing himself from her mind control, and seeing her for what she truly is now. She is the granny. She's aged so rapidly due to some instability that she is no longer recognisable as the little girl she once was, and that she projects herself to be. After getting injected by the toxin, she melts and combines with the mould in the house for one final attack as a huge fungal monster. Ethan is assisted as he is thrown an Albert gun loaded with ramrod rounds by a circling blue Umbrella helicopter, this organisation who have been closing in on the Connections for some time by this point. Using this weapon, Ethan puts an end to Evelyn as she calcifies after being shot by the ramrod. One of the soldiers working with the newly reformed Blue Umbrella is revealed to be Chris Redfield from the original games. The game closes with Mia and Ethan on a helicopter out of the area, together recovering from their ordeal, and ruminating on the fact that the Bakers were victims in this whole affair. I'm now going to touch on to the DLCs as they act as a sort of epilogue for the game. The first DLC that I'm going to talk about is Not a Hero, where we step into the shoes of Chris Redfield as he pursues Lucas into the mines, to stop the transfer of any further E-series data getting out to any third parties. Chris is a soldier in the BSAA and is working with the Blue Umbrella. This is a reformed Umbrella who seeks to undo the wrongs of their parent company by halting all illegal bioweapons development, and they've been closing in on the Connections and Evelyn for some time. In the mines, Chris sees the true extent of the Connections' impressive lab. Lucas was put in charge after the arrival of Evelyn, despite no prior affiliation with the criminal group. It turns out he also turned on the Connections, killing their scientists here and attempting to sell the E-series info and data to other interested third parties. Desperate to stop this, Chris tracks down Lucas, kills him in his human form, kills him in his fungal form, and again, stops the data getting out. In the End of Zoe DLC, we step into the shoes of Joe Baker, Jack's brother who lives in the swamp, as he tries to make sense of the epidemic that's happening around him. Set sometime after the main game, Zoe has been reduced to a calcified state by Evelyn, and she needs help desperately. Joe fights his way through the zone, with his fists by the way, which is very impressive, which has been quarantined by the BSAA and a Blue Umbrella, and he does this to try and find Zoe a cure. He eventually synthesizes one using BSAA equipment. However, not long after, Zoe is taken away by a huge bioform. And this bioform once again turns out to be Jack, and he takes Zoe back to the Baker house. In a final showdown in the Baker house, Joe, donning a powered-up lifting gauntlet, finally beats the life out of Jack for the final time, and he heals Zoe with the cure. They are then both looked after by Chris and the BSAA, when Chris gets a phone call and passes it to Zoe. It is Ethan, and she thanks Ethan for keeping his promise of sending help, which he did. So that's where the story leaves off. The swamp is damaged by the quarantine, the mold infection is still there, Evelyn is dead, Zoe and Joe Baker survive from the family, Ethan seems to have some sort of pull or relationship now with the BSAA and Umbrella, or did he before? That's a story and a video for another time. And Chris is back on the scene. There's obviously so much more detail in the game in regards to little bits of lore and little bits of depth to the molded and the infection and the connections and Umbrella. However, I just wanted to give you the bare minimum knowledge needed to step into the next game so you know the broad strokes which happened to Ethan in the prior game as he enters the village. So thanks guys, if you like this video please consider giving a like and a subscribe, as I will be doing more similar videos on the village and a couple more on Resident Evil 7 before the new game comes out. Please, consider giving me a subscribe, but until the next time guys, I hope you have a great evening. Thanks very much.